Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growth Stage, a podcast by FastSpring, where we discuss how digital product companies grow revenue, build meaningful products, and increase the value of their business. I'm your host, Jesse Poliato. I support the digital product community as part of my role with FastSpring, and I love bringing the best of the community to you here on the Growth Stage podcast. Today, I'm really pumped. We have with us Blake Hutchison from Flippa.com, CEO. And we're going to talk to Blake and get insights and updates about Flippa.com, as well as get insights on things that you should know if you're a digital business owner, SaaS owner, looking to potentially sell your business. And maybe get some insights from Blake on how to go about that and how you might go about it on Flippa.com. Blake, thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate it as well. Should be a great chat.
Yeah, looking forward to it. For those who are not familiar, can you start just giving us a quick overview of what Flippa is and how it helps entrepreneurs and business owners?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Flippa's the number one platform to buy and sell digital assets and online businesses. So it should be a really good fit for a lot of the FastSpring customer base and audience out there listening in today. But in short, if you own a SaaS business, if you own a Slack plugin, if you own a Chrome extension, if you own an online publishing business, even like a blog or an iOS or Android app, we're the pathway to exit. So we can offer liquidity and match these entrepreneurs up to the universe of buyers out there who are looking to buy these assets. And they buy those assets much like buyers and investors buy any other asset. They're interested in the return on investment. They're interested in the growth opportunities. They're interested in the strategies and the synergies that those businesses can bring them, either as individuals or as companies. So it's a marketplace. It's a platform. Our sweet spot is really between sort of that $250,000 size business all the way up to maybe a $25 million business. And our job is to match them up and make sure that they can find a happy home.
No, I love it. I'm tempted to dive into, I've already got some questions on the platform and some of the specifics, but let me ask before that, love to hear just a little bit about yourself. Like, what led you to become the CEO of Flippa? What got you into this particular business model? I believe you've got some different, experience as well. So just love to hear how you got connected.
Yeah, maybe a few things. I mean, first comment would be, I was an entrepreneur. I did sell my own business on Flippa. So I'm a customer of the platform and have used it and therefore had some understanding of its power. And that therefore, created a bit of a love affair between, I guess, the board and myself. Secondly, I've worked across many, many business models. And of course, we need to know how those businesses work here at Flippa, and I've done that. So I've worked in SaaS businesses that were fast growth and now very big in the case of, say, Xero, which is cloud accounting software. I ran one of the fastest growing online travel agencies, which of course is e-commerce here in Australia, called Luxury Escapes. That's now $1 billion company. When I was running it, it was a lot smaller than that, but scaled that up very, very quickly. As mentioned, I was an entrepreneur myself. I built a marketplace for specialty food, and I've worked in the Valley, based in San Francisco, across across one startup and then a very established online publishing business called Lonely Planet, which of course at one point was the biggest guidebook publisher in the world. So I guess the sort of the dynamic number of different industries and the business models I've worked across has been of great assistance to me here. And of course, we work with entrepreneurs across the globe, regardless of their monetization strategy and approach. So that sort of diversity stood me in good stead, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, even just having sort of the gut instinct for, as looking at decisions for the business or how to grow it, like being able to at a sort of instinctual level, take into account the diversity of business models and stuff that are out there. That's like I would imagine that's just a huge asset for yourself personally and for the business for having you at the helm.
Yeah. And you know what? I say this a lot. I mean, business is business. And of course, industries are different and some industries are very complex. But for the most part, the way you run business is actually quite analogous to the way you might run another business. The tools and tactics tend to be similar, albeit you need to nuance those. But you just so much from seeing so much across so many different businesses. And I think that's been really helpful.
Yeah, that's huge. How has Flippa evolved since you've become CEO? Has there been any big milestones or changes, or has it been largely sort of this steady state growth process, or what's that look like?
Yes, so we've certainly grown 6 years consecutively, but I think the biggest evolution for us was going from, what might be a low value digital asset marketplace into an M&A platform. And the biggest difference between the two of those statements is One, low value, two, sort of medium and high value. And then two, the actual service layer built into the technology underneath the hood. And so in the past, it was really a chat environment. So, hey, Jesse, I like the look of your blog. Can I buy it? Yes, you can, Blake. Let's do a deal. And that's the history of Flippa. Now it's a dynamic M&A platform. So we've got obviously still that negotiation engine, which is the chat room. We now call that the deal room. But then you've got M&A insurance, which is basically a reps and warranties insurance. You've got due diligence built in. You've got 15 different data integrations. You've got an AI matching tool that does 20 million matches annually, just in excess of 400,000 weekly. You've got different asset types. You and I spoke about, SaaS plugins, Chrome extensions, all these types of different digital business modes that are now sort of prevalent in 2024. So we've had category expansion be a critical part of the business. So I think it's really the maturation of the platform in what is still a nascent industry, and then the service layer that we've built within the experience itself.
That rings so true for me personally, because I experienced Flippa first, I think, coming out of like a digital marketing background, and probably 10 to maybe 15 years ago, where I think at that time, and please correct me if I get this wrong, it felt like very much like people were selling their blogs there.
Yes.
This was when blogging was very new, or at least it was kind of in the upswing, and everybody, there was monetization. And I think people were like, oh my gosh, I could actually sell this. This is like a sellable business. And Flippa was one of the places you did that, right?
You're absolutely right, Jesse. That was the beginnings. There were more blogs than there were anything else. And of course, there are today, but the digital economy has evolved substantially. So I think, look, the number one, to be candid and transparent about it, we sell more e-commerce businesses than anything else. And then second to that would be online publishing. Third to that would be SaaS. And then you sort of have this long tail of new asset types. And so an example of that would be YouTube channels, which is a very fast growing category within the Flippa ecosystem. So people sell a YouTube channel as an asset. They sell the back catalog. We sell KDP, so Amazon Kindle Publishing. That's a really fast growing category for us. And again, things like Slack plugins, Chrome extensions, this sort of evolution of the platform economy is starting to find its way to Flippa.
That's interesting to me. Partly because I think a lot of the logic around owning a business is that you have to really own your own platform so that you are in control of what you're selling, right? But if you're selling YouTube channels and stuff, is there any, I don't want to say gotchas or tricks, but any complexities or nuance is probably a better way to say that, around those categories you mentioned at the end, where you're trying to sell a business that is largely built on a third-party platform that you yourself do not entirely control.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I mean, candidly, I still think e-commerce is the most complex to buy as an investor because there's so many moving parts. So, it depends on the e-commerce sort of type. You've got direct to consumer, you've got dropship, you've obviously got Amazon, you've got the other marketplaces like Walmart, etc. And so there's complexities there, and you've got warehousing, you've got inventory, you've got cost of landing that inventory from maybe China or any other market in the world into the US. So e-commerce is maybe the most complex with respect to how many moving parts there are. And funnily enough, I mean, I obviously take the question, but funnily enough, YouTube channels, as an example, are probably the least complex. And the reason being is, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. So it's actually similar to buying a blog. What you're actually looking for is something which dominates YouTube search, something which has clearly high views, which is the equivalent of page views on a blog. And it's kind of the most passive. And I never want to say that there's a passive business you can buy, because I'd be setting people up for failure, but it's kind of the most passive, in the sense that if something, if a video about trampolines is consistently generating 100,000 views each month, and it's been doing so for the last 12 months, well, it's highly unlikely, unless Google search changes its search algorithm, which is probable, but it's highly unlikely that all of a sudden this thing drops off a cliff. If it's generating 100,000 views, it will probably generate 100,000 views the following month. And then, of course, you generate revenue in much the same way as a blog. You've got the equivalent of AdSense, which is a Google product for YouTube, and they'll serve up ads and you'll generate revenue. You'll take that check home every month. So it's it's actually relatively consistent. And when you're doing the due diligence, there's only so many assets within a YouTube channel you need to assess.
True.
So it can be complex in the sense that if the channel you're buying is so dependent on new, fresh content all the time, you obviously imagine yourself being able to produce that in line with the audience expectations. But if you're buying mostly a back catalog, then it's less tricky.
You know, a slightly different lens to look at kind of the audience and like this through would be geography. Like you mentioned the different industries that you see coming up, the ones that are sort of leading the pack, these interesting ones that are rising. Is there any kind of places where geographically you're seeing like we're starting to see a lot more business or a lot more acquisitions in these regions?
Yep. So the US is our biggest market by an absolute stretch. Still 70% of all trade happens in the US on Flippa. What we have seen though, Jesse, and I think it's super interesting, is the rise of sort of Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, entrepreneurial environment, entrepreneurship hubs. And what is interesting to watch when you look at the graphs at Flippa that we track each month, US buyers still rocketing up and to the right. So the number of buyers investing in this asset class continues to increase, but what they buy is more regionally diverse. And
Interesting.
so the Americans buying American assets, and now it's Americans buying global assets. And so 67% of trade on Flippa is cross-border. And essentially what they're doing is going after all of the entrepreneurs across places like Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Seoul, Thailand, etc. So many entrepreneurs building great small businesses that are infinitely leverageable, and they're then applying their understanding of the US approach to running these businesses. They're applying their skill set, and they're buying these businesses regardless of where they're based around the world. So that's been a substantial shift in the supply side of the Flippa marketplace.
Interesting. You just said that phrase, literally what I was about to say. It's interesting to see diversification as a supply side driven phenomenon rather than a demand side. Usually it's like, I want to diversify so I'm not all in one market. But this is the other way, where there's just so many good things out there around the world that people are like, well, I guess I could buy a company in Vietnam as well as I could in Illinois. And that's interesting.
Yeah. And there's so many stories of that. I mean, there's a San Francisco-based company. They're called Sporkle, where they're the largest online trivia business in the world. And they recently bought a business out of Helsinki, Finland. And the AI matching connected them up with that opportunity. There's no way that they would find that opportunity without the platform and the matching algorithm existing. So all of a sudden they find themselves in a deal room, negotiating with a broker and entrepreneur based on the other side of the world. And that therefore is their pathway to growth and inorganic growth through acquisition. And they find that asset. It happens to be that the perfect asset is operating out of Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that AI is a key driver, at least if I infer that from that example, where, because of course, I mean, this is the problem of all digital world that we live in. There's just so much opportunity, so much content, so many connections. So that's how you guys are steering people through that breadth of...
It's become enormous. And yeah, I'm sort of, jumping on the bandwagon, aren't I, with respect to commentating about it. But the reality is it's become an enormous driver of our business. And it's because it's adding so much greater efficiency and accuracy to the matching process. And so, deal flow and deal origination is one of the challenging things about M&A. And so if you are the founder, the CEO, or the analyst working at Sporkle, you can't just be logging into marketplaces and platforms every day and seeing what's out there. You're reliant on us pushing to you the deals that we think are the best fit. And you've got to get that right, because if you don't get it right, you just annoy the client. And so the AI, the precision that we've been able to build with respect to those matches has been outstanding. So what it does is it looks at intent signals. So if they are browsing the marketplace, it basically makes an inference as to the fit of one asset based on other assets that they're looking at. So it's kind of piece one. That's relatively simple and rudimentary. The second thing it does is obviously read the mandate and the bio, and then it picks up keywords within the mandate and bio and goes and finds relevant assets. And then the third thing it does is you kind of got these graph neural networks. So it looks at all the assets on the platform and that sort of creates synergy. So it's a scatter plot. What is the proximity of one asset to another based on this network? And then it does that on the buyer side too. So it actually looks like buyers like you, and what those other buyers are finding interesting, and then it infers that you will also find that interesting. In short, we then ping a text message, ping an email, and we say, we've got a match for you, check it out here. And that's driven substantial scale in our matching business.
Are you familiar with Pandora.com, the music company?
Absolutely. When I was living in San Francisco in 2005, they had just started and they were in West Oakland alongside me.
The what you just described to me is like a two-sided Pandora. It's not only correlating the people that like this band also, or bands like this or like this other one, but they're correlating you.
Yeah.
You know, people like Jesse, tend to log into this, and you're kind of doing it on both sides to kind of optimize and match, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
Is there any, this, you may have been what you just talking about would answer this, but I'm curious if there's any particular unique challenges around a place like Flippa and running that. Feels very complex, in so many ways, and kind of the types of deals that we've done, vertical industries, geographies. Is there anything about that that's like, hey, this is really different than anything I've done in the past, and here's how I tackle it?
Absolutely, Jesse. I mean, it's a managed marketplace. And so firstly, you've got the marketplace aspect of that. It's two-sided. You must fill up supply to ensure that you provide the adequate service that your demand side is looking for you to supply, to provide. That's an always-on battle. And so we're what you call a high-value, low-repeat marketplace. And so all the transactions are of a high value. There's very few marketplaces that operate at this value. You might have something like obviously a Zillow, a Redfin, an Open Door. All of these are sort of managed marketplace businesses that are selling high value, and then the low repeat nature of it. So you've got to get it right first time round. If you don't, you lose the opportunity to sell and collect revenue. And the likelihood of that customer coming back is quite rare. There's very few entrepreneurs who spin up more than one asset, more than one business. And ultimately, there are buyers who are very prolific, buying 10, 20, 30 assets, but in reality, most people are buying one or two. So you've got to get the customer experience right from day dot. And that takes some time to evolve, and we're continually evolving that.
Yeah.
In addition to that, the matching piece is hard. The cross-border nature of it is hard. Pricing is really difficult. So these are complex. And so one YouTube channel with 100,000 views isn't the same as another YouTube channel with 100,000 views. The category is different. Where it derives its views from is different. An American audience is worth more than an Eastern European audience, just by nature of what advertisers will spend. So the pricing algorithm that goes into valuing these businesses is tricky. And we got it wrong for a long time, actually. And I'd say it's a lot more accurate than it's ever been. Of course, staffing, you've got to have sales staff on the ground across all of these major entrepreneurship markets so that someone understands the process of selling. It's all good and well to do that through an outstanding onboarding experience, which we've clearly built. But if someone's going to sell something for $250,000, it's a highly emotional sale.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to get that right. And that requires good quality staff operating across, in our case, 20 different countries. So it is complex.
Yeah, and even that last comment about the emotional nature of it, and that it's a large deal. It's maybe analogous to, people talk about if you're buying a residence that you're going to live in, it's often the biggest purchase of your life, and it's this massive moment for you.
Correct.
Like when you're with pricing, do you find that part of that emotional kind of like walking people through the sales process is educating them on what the pricing should be? Do people come loaded with a lot of maybe misconceptions around how the process works, or are most people pretty kind of hip to the flow of this?
Yeah. So if we step back a little bit, the first problem is most business owners aren't thinking about exit. Most business owners are thinking about the day-to-day operations of their business, how to put a roof over their head, how to grow it, how to generate revenue and pay their staff. So the complexity of the business starts with one, awareness for the problem at hand. And the problem at hand is that ultimately businesses tend to not last forever. Businesses are assets. They are valuable, and there's a liquidity opportunity that we can provide. So you've got to make people aware of that. Then, yes, to answer your question on pricing, they mostly have an inflated view, as you would expect, of what their business is worth, and they tend to tie that to what they read about the VC industry or what they're seeing in the public markets.
Oh, right.
And of course, these businesses don't have the scale or opportunity that a VC asset would typically have for growth. Its growth profile is different. And then secondly, you don't have the always on day-to-day, minute-by-minute liquidity that you get in the public markets. So it tends to be that they are not valued as high as businesses which have that liquidity or have achieved that scale.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to be educated as to that. And then, of course, people don't really know how businesses are valued. They'll say, but hang on, my brand's great, my product's great. And we'll say, well, that's great. We understand that. We respect that. But the way these businesses are bought and sold is on historical performance, not future opportunity. The future opportunity is for the new owner to realize, which is actually more analogous to buying property than it is to investing in a startup or buying public stock.
Yeah, right. The potential's there, but you have to put the work in to realize it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some education that happens. The good news is we have the equivalent of like a Zillow's estimate, where we've got so much sales data that we can predictively price these things and tend to get it right.
Is there any advice you'd give to a SaaS or digital product company that is looking to sell their business on Flippa? What should they be thinking about? I mean, some of the stuff you just said, obviously. Anything else that you'd say, be considering this if you're looking to do an exit here?
Yeah, so investors are pretty savvy. If they're buying a SaaS asset, they tend to know the metrics that matter to them. And therefore, we try to educate founders as best we can as to the metrics that matter. So you can have a SaaS business that says, hey, we're great. We're doing $2.5 million ARR. But the reality is they've got a high churn rate, their LTV is low, and their CAC costs are high. And so the metrics that matter to a SaaS business, we would highly encourage most SaaS business owners to study, to understand, and to improve and show consistent improvement, or at least consistent effort to improve. The second thing is just find a good quality sort of financial hygiene. Are you using accounting software? Do you understand your inflow? Do you understand your cash flow? Do you have a good feel for how the business is performing on a day-to-day basis? And we find that sounds simple, Jesse, actually, but we find that entrepreneurs are obviously so busy in the trenches that that financial hygiene is less likely to be there. So we highly encourage people to get a bookkeeper and manage a clean set of books day in, day out, because it does improve their ability to run the business well, but it also sets themselves up for a better possibility at an exit long term. Probably the other thing is to start to imagine when the time will come that you may want to move on. And so we often find that people come to us, they suddenly say, oh, I was at Christmas lunch and I was talking to my family and I've decided that in 2025 is my time to exit. And then things aren't in place. They don't have standard operating procedures. They don't have the financial hygiene that we alluded to before. They don't have a sense for what it's worth. They don't have a sense for how much they are willing to part ways with this business for. And so we encourage people to start to think about that time. They'll say, well, I'll never wave the white flag. Well, that's okay. Think about all the things that annoy you in the business and start to plot a pathway to understanding when that time might come for you. Is it a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out? And then imagine the check. What size check will make you happy? You sort of need to work toward that and build a financial position in the business that will give you that best possible chance of success.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of reframing, what you had said a few paragraphs ago about people often, they look at the VC markets, they look at that and they value their business according to these things, but their business is very different. But I really like that framing, like, well, if you think your business is worth X, then let's build the framework and the pieces in place that value it at that, so you can feel good about that sales price and realistically getting it.
Yeah, I mean, if you take good quality public market SaaS multiples right now, they're quite compressed still, right? And so you're looking at maybe 5, if you're lucky, 7 times for the average publicly traded SaaS business. Well, in the small market dynamic, you might be looking like sort of 2.5 to 5 times. 2.5 for a standard business, 5 times for a great quality business with a reasonably low churn rate, maybe sub 7% churn. So for those businesses, let's say therefore that you're doing $1 million ARR, but you're saying, well, I want a $10 million check.
Right.
Well, $1 million ARR business that is subscale, i.e. $1 million ARR, not generating substantial revenue at this juncture, that business isn't going to give you a $10 million check, but you can plot your pathway to that.
Right.
Say, okay, well, now I need to get this business to maybe $3 million ARR, $3.5 million ARR to imagine myself getting that $10 million check.
I wanted to ask you, you kind of mentioned like we have like a Zestimate type tool that will kind of value, and what are the key factors that it values on? Is it mainly sort of using those default metrics for SaaS multiples and then maybe considering churn rate, or is there some other key things that people should think about when they do sort of a back of the envelope calculation of their value?
Yeah, those things are included, but yeah, let's just go through them. So, revenue, your cost base, your net profit, and we understand and respect that SaaS businesses are not always profitable. They're reinvesting for growth. The cost of the technology is high. The cost of customer acquisition is high. So it doesn't need to be profitable, but those things are still taken into consideration. So that rule of 40 metric is considered in this landscape. Cost of acquisition, LTV, retention rate, churn, obviously. Then location. The reality is, if you're trading to an American customer, let's say for argument's sake, you've got a trade tech business going after construction companies or builders or plumbers or something like that. The reality is there's more plumbers in the US than there is in Australia. So if you've got a trade tech business and you're going after plumbers and you're selling a business to an investor on Flippa and you happen to be US versus Australia, well, you're going to get a compression to your multiple if you're Australian, unfortunately, compared to if you are the US, just by nature of the target addressable market and the opportunity for that new acquirer. So those things are all taken into consideration. Growth rate is taken into consideration. Clearly a declining business. There's very few people in the world who want to buy a turnaround. You're talking about a very specialist acquirer. And so again, this comes down to timing. A lot of entrepreneurs will suddenly say, oh, wow, I'm down again. Shit, I better exit. Well, the reality is that wasn't the time to exit. The time to exit was when you were moving up into the right. Now, we're not looking for moonshots, so we're not looking for triple-digit growth. Those businesses are actually considered a little bit speculative in a market like Flippa. We're looking for consistently growing businesses or even flat businesses where the predictable nature of the business is what an investor is most interested in.
Yeah, very interesting. So assuming somebody's sort of got their business in a place, they've got realistic expectations, they have some growth going on, or at least flatline performance, that they're not in this kind of bad situation of being in decline and then deciding. So they got those ducks in a row. They get the Flippa and they want to pursue doing an exit. Are there any strategies or patterns or things that would be like, if you're going to come in and do it, here's some advice on how to pursue that?
So one of the best tactics that most people won't do is to point out the weaknesses in the business. And the best way to do that is, investors, buyers are pretty savvy. They can see the strengths. The strengths are obvious. What is interesting to a good quality buyer are the things you don't do well. And so you have to be vulnerable. You have to say that I've never invested in an SEO and I have no idea what content marketing is. So therefore, if you have that capability, then my business will be beneficial with it. Or I've never advertised for customers on Facebook and Google, but if you have that capability, that will be an opportunity for this business. Our churn rate is poor but we actually know why. And we haven't got the means to develop that feature set that will help us with our churn and retention. So therefore, if you are a developer with experience in SaaS businesses in this particular category and industry, this business can be optimized. And so, because buyers are trying to imagine themselves taking over these businesses, right? Again, for the most part, they're not investing, they're acquiring. And so when they acquire, they then have to take it over. So they need to understand how it works today. They're the strengths, and they need to make sure that they can continue to run it to the same level that the business owner is running it today. And then secondly, they need to then understand what the weaknesses are so that once they've taken the asset over, understood it for some number of consecutive months, they can start to work away at those operational weaknesses and start to fast track their ROI.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's almost a reverse SWOT analysis. So the way I've done SWOT in the past, I imagine a lot of people have, you do your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and you go, here's an opportunity, apply our strength to the opportunity. But you're doing it different. You're saying, show your weakness.
Yeah.
And the weakness is actually where a purchaser or an acquirer say, I can turn that into an opportunity because I have a strength that you don't. So it's almost this inversion going on.
Yep. And it's an interesting one. Sometimes what is perceived as a strength, a buyer considers a weakness. So let me give you an example of that. Now, admittedly, I understand your audience is, SaaS, gaming, etc. And this is not an example of that, but I think they'll get it regardless. So there's an e-commerce business for sale right now. It's a $6 million listing. It's had a lot of attention. And what ends up happening is that acquirers and buyers find out that a lot of the stock that is bought is then personalized. So Jesse's buying a baby romper, and then his son or daughter's name stitched on the front.
Right.
And so the founders consider a strength, right? The personalization aspect of what this business offers is what is most attractive to it for parents all over the world. They love personalization of it. Jesse loves that he can have his name stitched into this romper for his new baby that's been born in the last 6 months. That's cool for you as a customer. It actually is what sets this business apart. But it's spooky to acquirers because the acquirer is going to spend $6 million on this business. And if they haven't worked in or operated a business which is built around personalization before, and is more mass market, churn and burn, high speed retail, that can be challenging. And so sometimes we do get entrepreneurs come to us and they'll say, this is a highly niche operation. And we agree that should be a strength. And ultimately our matching algorithm will find the relevant buyer for that type of business. But it can sometimes be a bit debilitating. And it does limit the chance to finding a buyer fast.
Yeah. Is most of the buyers, do you find they are people that run the business? I think you said this a couple minutes ago. They're acquiring, not investing. So most of the people that are purchasing the businesses intend to run them themselves.
Yeah, they run or they have a team to run. So we have what we call the side hustler. We have acquisition entrepreneurs, and we have institutional investors. Regardless, so the side hustler is, I've got a job, I'm Jesse, I'm Blake, I want to supplement my income, and I want to run this digital asset on the side, be it, Slack plugin, Chrome extension, SaaS business, whatever. I've got the acquisition entrepreneur, so that's Jesse or Blake, but we're going to quit our jobs, and we're going to buy something. We're going to buy our next job. So we are an entrepreneur. It happens to be that we won't do the 0 to 1, we will do the 1 to 10.
Right.
And so that's a safe play because you don't have to invest all of that time up front in acquiring your first 100 or 1,000 customers, building a technology, understanding how it works, and then finding product market fit. Somebody else has done all of that heavy lifting for you. Regardless to your question, yes, I'm still operating. And then you have the institutional investor. So yes, they call themselves investors, but the reality is they do have a team waiting in the wings to operate. So they're either rolling up multiple assets that look the same. They're buying an asset that looks different, but is an awesome extension to some of the business that they already run today, typical PE type strategy, inorganic growth for a good quality business. To answer your question, again, they've still got a team to run it. So yes, they are owning and operating.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, this has all been extremely interesting, Blake. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been great. Is there any final thoughts or comments that maybe I didn't get to open up that you wanted to make with the audience before we wrap up here? Just want to see if you had any final advice for people in the SaaS and digital product world looking to sell their own business.
Oh, maybe 2 quick comments. If you want a very quick valuation, it's completely free. Just head to flippa.com, get a free valuation. Hope you don't mind me plugging that, Jesse. And then the second one is,
absolutely.
You asked the question about investing versus operating. So we are just about to launch Flippa Invest. So Flippa Invest will basically make available just in excess of 70,000 accredited investors on our platform who are looking to invest in good quality small businesses. Again, digital only, tech only businesses. They're not looking for moonshots. They're not looking for IPOs. They're looking to invest in good quality businesses where they can apply some advisory. So Flippa Invest will launch soon. And if anyone's interested in that, just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's wonderful. To reach out to, best thing to look you up on LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn's my sort of platform of choice. So grab me there. I'm pretty active there and happy to chat with anyone about anything.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it, Blake. This has been super interesting for me personally, and I'm sure for people that are listening.
Thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the Growth Stage podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Poliato. I support digital product community as part of my role here at FastSpring, and I love getting to do this, hang out and bring the best of community here on the podcast with y'all. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Catch you next time. Thanks.